This episode of the Storyteller Show podcast is brought to you by Harney and Sons Fine Teas, a perfect companion to every story. Whether you're reading, writing, or just enjoying a quiet moment to yourself, Harney and Sons offers a beautiful selection of teas to elevate this experience. From classic blends to unique finds, every cup is crafted with care, just like the stories we love to share. Shop harney.com/discount/storyteller, and storyteller is in all caps. Now let's get back to the show.
Welcome back to the Storyteller Shelf podcast. It's Jackie and Teresa, and we are here to celebrate the final days of summer. Not so happy for kids, but happy for parents, I think, and all those around them. This August, we are prepping for back to school, as usual. So we're talking about growth, confidence, connection. If you're an author, we're looking at some sales for this time, hopefully, especially in the school arena. And our theme for this episode is social emotional learning. So we have a really special guest with us today, Meredith Davis. And Meredith, I'm going to turn it over to you to ask our usual question. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I am a writer. I write middle grade. I also write picture books, but you'll find middle grade on the shelf and picture books in my computer right now. So I'm hoping to get those published. I also review picture books, and I like to do those in themes. So I love that we're talking about social emotional learning because that dovetails right into what I do. Little bit of background, I started the Austin chapter of SCBWI. So for writers, you might know what that is, but if you don't, it's the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. I started the Austin chapter for that, but it's a national organization. So I know a lot about the writing end of it. And then a long time ago, I worked in an independent children's bookstore. So I got to see the tail end of it when I was actually putting the book in kids' hands. And I just loved that. So I've kind of touched all the different parts of writing, from generating the material and writing the books, which I love, and engaging with that author community, to engaging with kids and doing author visits, and got to put those books in kids' hands in stores. So yeah, that's who I am. I also have 3 kids. I have a grandson. I have a doodle.
Are you going to do a roundup, perhaps, of back to school books on your website?
Absolutely. I love that. And there's some great ones out there. There's some amazing new picture books and middle grade about back to school type. There's a lot of material out there.
Meredith, $1 million question. Why do you think social emotional learning is so crucial in literature, especially today?
Yeah, well, I think it's really great to ask an author that, because what's so cool about being a writer is that you get to tell things that story. And so why is social emotional learning? I think you could answer that. I could answer that as a parent who's raised kids who need to be like socially aware and know how to handle their emotions from the time they were little to now as adults. But as a writer, it's so important to tap into how we can use stories to really show kids through character, through setting, through plot, how that looks on a page so they can watch it happening with someone else, and then they can translate it and they can learn from it and they can grow themselves. So I think story is just such a powerful way to sometimes get topics that might be hard to grasp or explain to kids, or don't feel personal to them until they see it and they're like, oh yeah. Like empathy, that's a big word. I don't really know what that means, but you want to talk about bullies? Hey, let me tell you about this kid at my class. So it makes it personal. So yeah.
In your opinion, what role do stories play in helping kids develop skills like empathy, self-awareness, and relationship building?
I think one of the things I love to kind of impart to kids when I talk to them is that they are living their own stories. And so I think if they can see that in a book, if you can share a story with them and they start seeing themselves, it helps. So like I said, it's really powerful. I think it's really interesting too to think about middle grade readers who are in a different world than my kids even were 20 years ago, because now there's social media. They're a lot more exposed to things out there, whether it be bullying or self-image. And so I feel like it's more in the news, it's more part of the conversation. And so it's even more important to get those stories out to kids to help them cope with big feelings and big things. Whether they're homeschooled or they're in a public school, I feel like they're just exposed to a lot more than they used to be. But they're also equipped. I feel like this is part of a conversation that it maybe wasn't a part of in the past. That kids can learn social skills. They can learn these things. And whenever you're ready, I've got some great stories to share of just like stories that do this really well, books that do this really well, whether picture books or middle grade. There's so much out there. And I think just being aware of it is what we need to be doing as parents or as writers, to just see where our work fits in to that body of work that's out there. And I'll just say one more thing, that I think that it's really important as a writer to not go into it saying, I'm going to teach the kids this lesson. I think it's very much got to be an undercurrent, because kids want to read a book because of the story. It's got to be a well-told story first. And then it's almost on the marketing end when you can turn around and say, hey, this book could also be used in a classroom to teach a kid that how to be compassionate, or how to share, how to help, or how to engage with a kid who's new in school, or whatever it is that could be helpful in that environment.
That's very true. I love how you're saying the books are the real life example for the kid to start to understand what these big words mean. So let me tag right off of the last thing you said. We know these books are valuable and tools. They're tools in classrooms and libraries. So from your end, as a mom, grandma, author, all of them together, let me ask you a little more specifically, how do you think that the books with strong social emotional components can really support educators in the classroom?
I think that one of the things that they can do is come at it from a different angle. So instead of it being a lecture, instead of it being rules on a chalkboard, it's coming at it subversively. It's story first. And so I think that's really helpful, whether the classroom is a homeschool, it's around your kitchen table. It's also not you telling the kid, it's the author. It's somebody else. It's someone outside of their regular world. I don't know if you've experienced as a parent, or someone who's had kids with them, that a lot of times they listen to someone else a lot more than they listen to you. It has a different weight. And so I feel like stories and authors may have a weight that they may not be listening to you if they hear you every day and they hear the same thing every day. It can also help really look at things in a different way, from a different angle. So like they may think of empathy in one instance, like you need to really show empathy to your little sister because she's crying right now and she's sad. So let's see you be empathetic. Let's see you care for her. But maybe they haven't seen empathy from a school setting, a totally different environment. So it just fleshes it out. It fleshes out these big topics. And it's also a good way to enter conversation. I was just reading somebody's blog post, and they were talking about storytelling books and what makes a good storytelling book. And one of the things that was really beautiful that she did was she extended the conversation. So when she closed the book, then she started talking about it with the kids. What did you think about this? And what did you think about that? And it gives them a way to become engaged instead of just being talked to. They get to engage in that conversation because they've got a common story now that they're sharing and common characters. So, okay. So I'll talk about one that I think is really great for kindness. I'm going to do mostly picture books because it's just easier to share in the small stories. So there's this book called Stick and Stone. And you could say that it's just a great book about friendship. It's about a stick and a stone and their friends. But if you read it, it's really clever. It's really funny. And it's really tender. The stick gets hurt and the stone comes and saves them. The stick falls off of a swing. I mean, the pictures are darling. But what I'd love to tell parents and teachers and people that I'm talking to when I'm talking about how to use books in a setting where whether you just want to share a good story or you're trying to give some more information to the kids or teach them something, is flip through it and see if it makes you go, oh, or it touches your heart. Because similar to the kids, like there's some that have this like very emotional component, this connection. And if you're connecting to the story, then the kid's going to connect to it too. It's a great one for kindness. There's tons that you could pick. But to think about stories creatively, they may be like really familiar stories to you, but you've never really thought of using them in a setting to teach something. And that's actually probably the best book to use because it wasn't written to teach anything. It was just written to tell a good story. I hope that answered your question.
You know what? You said something so cool, which I just have to draw some attention to. You mentioned that the book is there to support the educator in line of giving a new voice to whatever is in the lesson. And I'm just thinking as someone who's neurodivergent that sometimes you need to hear things in a different way to really process and understand it or learn it for the first time. And as amazing as educators are, we're all human at the end of the day. and we tend to explain things in the same words on repeat. At the tip of your hands, there's a bunch of books for you to grab to bring a new voice in to the classroom so that kids who are having trouble processing the usual, they can use that resource to hop on and actually engage with it.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. There's such a broad spectrum of kids in a classroom or a library or storytelling setting. So they're all hearing the same story. They may take it in different ways, but it can add so much to the conversation. It can be so rich when they all start talking about it and saying how it impacted them and really opening each other's eyes. The kid who's like, I felt this way too. And for this kid over here to be like, you have? I've never thought of you as stick. I thought you were a stone. It gives them talking points. It gives them something concrete that they can hold on to, you know?
You brought up so many good things. I was thinking about when I was a kid, the books that really were kind of like the sort of social emotional learning when you think of Berenstain Bears, those lessons where they're talking about the first day of school. I think it was one where the brother bear had outgrown his bed and he's growing and he's changing. So as a kid, I remember those books particularly. Those still stick in my memory. You were saying the social emotional learning and the books in general, they're everywhere and you can use them for all kinds of examples, especially in the classroom or in general. So what trends have you noticed? Because you do book reviews, right? When it comes to SEL-centered narratives, are there any particular themes or types of stories that are resonating?
Definitely diversity of all sorts. So books that can touch on, you talked about neurodivergent, people of different color, different faiths, traditions, all of those things are fair game and they're being like broadly embraced by the publishing industry. Just bring that on. Let's open up our eyes to all the different types of people and cultures and colors and all those things. And so definitely a surge of those books have been appreciated. And you hear a lot about people of color that are like, I've never saw myself in books when I was a kid. And it meant so much to me when I read this book and I saw another brown person or I saw another Asian person. And it wasn't the focus of the book. And I think that's what's so beautiful, like to just see that diversity and have it just be part of our everyday and not point a finger at it and go, this is different. You need to like it. But just to have the book out there, have it be engaging, have the people, the characters, their lives. And it was just, I just read this book that was so good. And it was a Newbery Honor. Magnolia Wu unfolds the mystery or something unfolds. And it's so good. And it's this Asian family and they own a laundromat in a big city. And her life is so different from what my life looked like. You know, like her parents both work, they work all day. She walks in and goes, it has freedom to roam around the city, doesn't have a lot of means, but has lots of friends and has found her way and is pretty independent for a young kid. And it's a really sweet story. So, you know, there's tons of those out there like that. And so that's one trend that I would say I see a lot of. And like I said before, like I think kids are a lot more informed. They know even like language, like self-image or body awareness, and even like neurodivergent is probably a word that kids hear more than they used to and are understanding what that means. And so I think that's been a trend, like being able to say those things and have kids know what it means is also, we're just in a different place. And I do think there's also like a growth. I think people recognize how powerful children's books can be. And so there's a lot of independent presses coming up. There's a lot of there's a growth in like faith-based children's presses and like a push to get more out there, get some more middle grade, get some more great stories in that arena. There's a lot of awards that highlight these underrepresented voices that used to not be there. And so it's easier to kind of find books that are like being awarded for excellence in those categories. I just think there's a push, there's an awareness, and so then there's a push, so then it gets rewarded, and so then there's more out there. It's a great resource for people that I think before, like you mentioned Berenstain Bears, there weren't very many books like that. And so it was like all that they had to turn to. And I think in today's market, I don't know if you could sell Berentine's Bear. They're very wordy. They're very different from a lot of the books that are published today, but they're still in print. And you still remember reading them as a kid, you know? So they were still good. They were still so necessary. Like there was a reason for those books. There's a reason why they were so popular. And it wasn't because it had an amazing marketing campaign. You know, they're like staple bound in the grocery store, but there's still books out there that we remember. It's because there's such a need for it. There's still a need. I've heard some people say, we've heard SEL, social emotional learning, like, is there a glut from the author side. Like, are there too many? Should we stop writing these because it's like too many? And I don't think so. I don't think there will ever be too many books that teach kids empathy and compassion and all these things. I think they can be poorly written. And I think if you think, oh, I'm going to market my book as SEL because that's a buzzword and I know that that's what people are looking for, you may not find that success because it didn't come from your heart. It didn't come from the heart of a story. It came from the of wanting to teach or wanting to get in their strategy or something. Kids can sniff that a mile away. They can sniff it like they just know, hey, this isn't a good story. You were trying to teach me something. Well, I've been tricked. But I do think there's just, you're right. There's definitely a trend, and I think it's never really going to go away.
Let me take us on a bit of a turn. So we've hinted and dusted at this, but I think we're all in agreement that the best stories with social emotional learning are not ones that are intentionally written to portray that. It has to come naturally as a component of your characters or your plot. So you're sitting with an author or someone who's an aspiring author, maybe someone who's on the newer side, and they just know that they want to teach. What advice would you give them to make sure that they get to their goal of teaching, but really create an authentic story that will resonate with kids who are little bloodhounds?
That is a great question because you really move into craft and how do you tell a good story? And so some people start with setting. Some people start with character. They're like, this character came to me and I just couldn't drop it. I had to explore who this character was. Some people start with premise. They're like, what if? What if this thing happened? That's how I wrote like the Minor Miracle. What if when you take the eye test at school, the government is actually testing you and they can see in your eyes and see if you have the ability to manipulate gravity, because then you'd be a gravitar. And then it just like the story just came out. But as I sold that story, well, the story is set in seventh grade. And so it's in a public school. Okay, well, if you're in seventh grade in a public school, there is going to be a bully. Like there just is. It just comes with the territory. And so then I had to create that bully and I had to create those situations and I had to think about, well, how does my character react to it? So I didn't come to my story wanting to teach, but it ended up being like, well, first he tries it this way. He does it by avoidance. Then he tries it this way. He does it. He has superpowers. He's going to pull stuff out of his mouth in the cafeteria and make it splat on the table and embarrass him. And everybody's going to laugh at him. Doesn't that feel good? Oh, maybe it doesn't feel good. And then, and then the final resolution. If I went into that, if I had a message that I wanted to teach, like I was like, you know what, my kids were bullied in school and it just breaks my heart. And I remember what worked for us and I want to show that. I want to give it to kids. Or think about C.S. Lewis when he was writing The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Like he had some spiritual truths that he wanted to get across. He buried them and it was this big metaphor. And so I would caution, I guess, authors that really have something they want to teach. I would write it down. I would put it on my computer and I'd say, okay, this is my guiding light. This is the thing that inspired me. And then that can continue to be your anchor. It can continue to be the thing that you look for, but I wouldn't try to beat it over the head because if it's what motivated you, it's going to come through. And you don't have to write a list of all the things that you're going to do to make it happen. I would say, it's your guiding light. Now let it go. And go find your story, go find your characters, go dig into setting, or it may be nonfiction. I mean, I wrote nonfiction and it was narrative nonfiction, told a story. I knew with my co-author, Rebecca, she had club feet. She was born with club feet in Rwanda and couldn't walk on her feet. And it was so heartbreaking how many people treated her. The kids made fun of her, even adults. There was a man that spit on her because she couldn't walk. She had to crawl for like the first 7 years of her life. Was I teaching empathy when I talked about how her sister was the one that would stand by her side and her sister would go to her when she had crawled off out of the way? I didn't mean to teach empathy. It just was there. It was like so tied to that story. I couldn't tell that story without talking about her little sister, Medea, and how she rose up to protect, and her whole family did. Her mom and her dad, they defended her in the midst of a lot of meanness. And I knew that kids would resonate with it, and they do, but I didn't set out to do that. So I think that every good story is going to have an emotional heart. It's going to actually have social emotional learning in it, even if you didn't intend to, because that's what makes a good story. It has an emotional resonance to it. It's not just plot. So I wouldn't worry. If you have a message to get across, it's going to get across. I don't think you need to plan it. It's just going to happen.
That is amazing. And like, I definitely understand where you're coming from as far as, bringing in that emotional sense. And I love the word that you chose, guiding light. I think that is like the perfect word and kind of summarizing exactly what you're trying to come across to your readers. And I like how you mentioned C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors. But how do you balance the emotional depth and make it age appropriate content?
I mean, I think how to keep kids engaged, how to do a well-written story. One of the things that I do before I ever really get into the weeds with mine is I figure out what are my mentor texts, who's already done this well. So like you mentioned C.S. Lewis. So I'm actually in a class right now where we're using The Horse and His Boy as a mentor text. And we look at it for dialogue and we look at it for, we call it an exoskeleton. How can we lay this on top of our characters? And so we actually haven't done anything with the social emotional learning, but we actually had a very interesting conversation this week about theme, and kind of the same thing that like the general consensus was, don't go into this manuscript, don't go into your story trying to get this theme across. It's going to come across at the end. I pushed back a little bit on that because to me, theme is my guiding light. Like, what is my theme? What am I trying to do with this book? If I don't have that, I go through a million different rabbit trails. So kind of to your point, Teresa, of like, how do you do that? How do you balance it? How do you keep from going off track? For me, it really is helpful just like practically to keep that on my computer, keep it close to me. I even like my desk is littered with little things that are like emotionally resonant with the story. So for Minor Miracle, there's like a little snow globe and there's a little Spider-Man and there's a little Empire State Building. They all have something to do with it. But there's this theme in those two books that are, it's that the superheroes, they pursue all that is true, good, and beautiful. And so I have those words on there. And then what you do is you find these little Easter eggs when you're writing that surprise you. And it's one of my favorite things about writing because you don't expect it, but you have in the back of your mind, okay, these kids, I want a kid that's reading this to be able to discern what is true, good, and beautiful. Because sometimes it's confusing and sometimes there's lies and sometimes there's people that claim to be telling the truth and they're not. And so how do you know that? Well, I'm going to show a character that's going through that very same thing. And so then those themes of like truth or good or beauty, and like my character, Noah Minor, he chooses badly. I'm hoping that kids will pick up on the fact that the reason he chooses badly, he has this choice to follow the organization that's going to train him in his gravitas and his gravity defying abilities, or to listen to this man who's actually an enemy of the program but is telling Noah, you're way more powerful than they're telling you. And you have the right to choose what you want to do. And it sounds good. I am more powerful. That's, oh, I wanted to hear that. That makes me feel better. And so really digging deep into that character and imagining basically myself in that character, and thinking, okay, how would I feel? I probably would want to listen to the one that's telling me that I'm better than everybody else. Is that the truth? Maybe sometimes, but like, am I undermining others in that? And so it's hard. It's hard to get that balance right. And I think also it's super valuable to have an editor, whether you're going through the traditional publishing route and your publisher has an editor, or you're going to independently publish and you're going to hire an editor. There's a lot of times where you just don't see it. And even having kids read your stuff. I was just talking to someone the other day who sent their manuscript to a 10-year-old and he was like, tell me when you get bored. That's what I need to know. And so you go through it yourself, you do your due diligence, you write it as good as you can, and then you share it. You give it to someone else. You remain open to feedback. You find out if there's a consensus or if it's just one person that has a problem with this. All those little details of balancing what you want to teach with what's actually happening, I think is super valuable to get other people's feedback. And honestly, that's social emotional learning for the author. Being able to grow and listen and have humility, you learn so much in that process.
Well, speaking of feedback, I want to talk a little bit about your audience. Have you had any feedback from kids or parents or educators or anyone really that shows or demonstrates that these social emotional themes in your book have impacted them, with them knowing it or not?
The first book that came out was the one I mentioned before. The co-author is Rwandan, and so it was her story. And so she has a condition called arthrogryposis, and it caused her feet to be turned. And I've heard from multiple kids who have a condition like that, and have been encouraged and have asked, like, how was she so strong? How was she so courageous? Or I've had siblings of kids that have had conditions like that, whether it was club feet. Some people, they have some sort of condition that's going to cause them to have surgery. Well, in the book, I go through what was it like for Rebecca to have surgery and how it was scary. that we see her at the other side. I think that's one thing that really distinguishes middle grade is that there's always hope. The good ones always have hope. And so I think it really has emboldened kids to pursue hard things. So you asked earlier, and I think this kind of ties back to what you were talking about. How do you weave it without being over the head? So one of the things I did with Her Own 2 Feet was the name of the book, is I had a couple of phrases, and they're phrases that are repeated just now and then. And the editor really helped me sprinkle them throughout. One of them was this phrase, strong like a butterfly. And the whole point of that was a butterfly doesn't look strong, but it can fly 3,000 miles. It can migrate 3,000 miles. So I was like, you can't tell how strong someone is from the way that they look. And that has been super resonant with kids. And when I say strong like a butterfly, they know what I mean. When I go to author visits, if I'm strong like a what, they know. They've read the book, they know it's strong like a butterfly. And I've been able to use that as a sticker and a bookmark, and it's something that immediately brings them to that point. And then the other phrase was this phrase called chance comes once. And it's interesting how that phrase came about. I was corresponding with people in Rwanda, and I was asking them, is there a Kinyarwanda phrase? Kinyarwanda is the language they speak, for something kind of like seize the day. Do you ever say something like seize the day? We have this phrase, mahikwe azarimwe, and it means chance comes once. And so there's these chance comes once moments for Rebecca where she has one chance to change her life, and will she be brave and bold and take it? And so I show the kids, this is what happened with Rebecca. And so it enabled us, you get all the way to marketing, and it's like there's this question when you open up the book and it says, what if you had one chance to change your life? And that's such a compelling question. And I think that's also a really good way to get kids to engage, to ask them a question, kind of an open-ended question that like fuels their imagination. And so especially if they've read the book, but even if they haven't, they see this picture of a girl with her leg in casts, and they wonder, what's her story? What if you had one chance to change her life? And here's this girl with 2 casts on. So that is one book that really fueled a lot of questions. Now with The Minor Miracle, I've had different sorts of questions. I've had kids be like, I was so surprised with who the bad guy was. I thought Noah was going to be listening to the right person, but he wasn't. You know, I've had kids really engage with the story, almost more on the merits of the plot. Like they love how exciting it is. They're with it. They're engaged. But the whole message with that one is we can all be superheroes. When I go in and I talk to kids, I can't wait to talk to them and say, what's your superpower? Well, it's not manipulating gravity, but I have a character in the threesome of characters there. We've got 2 that have superpowers and 1 who's not, but he's amazing. And he's the one that actually saves the day in the end. And so you didn't need to manipulate gravity. What you needed was you needed to be able to sacrifice. You needed to love your friends well. You needed to be willing to say a hard thing. All of those were just as big of a superpower and also hard to do. So I'm hoping that emboldens kids, you know? And so, yeah, it's been really fun to see them respond to that. And it's been so rewarding. I always tell kids when they email me, thank you. You reaching out, you taking the time to go to my website, to hit contact, to write me a little message. It means the world to me. And you may not think that that's a big deal, and you're just some 10-year-old kid or 12-year-old kid. It's a huge deal. Thank you. And so like showing them gratitude because I truly mean it. It's just, and I hope that empowers them to keep passing on kindness. I mean, it is a kindness to do that.
That's so inspiring. And I think that's at the end of the day, what all of us authors are really hoping for is to touch the reader in some way, to make them inspired, to make them happy. And then the golden part is to get the feedback from them, to hear them like, oh my gosh, they took a second to find me and to tell me what my book made them feel. We always encourage on this podcast that money is not a bad word and sales are a good thing. We want people to get paid, but it's just maybe a little bit even above that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's precious. It's very precious. Thinking back on that question of how do you weave things in, another thing I think that I didn't mention before is that sometimes the writer doesn't really know what they're saying until they finish that first draft. And that definitely was the case with this book that's coming out in May. Like I kind of knew what I wanted to say, but I wanted it to be different from book 1. So book 1 was really all about like, we're all superheroes. So I was like, well, I want to do something a little bit different. What can it be? And I realized at the end that it was all about like connecting with other people, stopping to listen, getting to know them, recognizing what we have in common. that can be super powerful. And I think one of the things that I realized as I was writing is I was also learning it. So, like for any kids that might be listening, like adults are still learning too. And so it was so significant to me as I was reaching out and connecting to other authors and connecting to readers. It just sparked my brain when you said that about how important it is. Like it is the power of connection, what we're doing right now, like who knows who's going to hear this podcast and who knows what they might take away from it. And so like you guys are superheroes, like you're enabling people to connect. But like you didn't say that, you're just doing it. And hopefully what's what comes through in this book that comes out in May. That is a powerful message. And I think because I didn't even realize it to the end, of course I went back and edited it and made sure that that was consistent throughout, but I didn't like heavy-handed it because it just transpired that that's what the characters learned, and that's what I was learning too.
Yes, for anyone listening, remember, adults, we are always learning. Learning never stops. You're always a student. My mom used to tell me if you learned one thing out of a class or one thing that day, it was a day or a class that was worth it.
When we were working as an author, right? And also as an illustrator, because obviously those two go hand in hand. But we as authors and illustrators, we work together in helping to get a book out to the world, to the reader. We work and we have so many hats, and especially if you're a self-published author, you've got even more hats. What advice would you give to creatives about showcasing that SEL in a pitch to an agent, to a publisher, or school visit, especially for someone who hasn't pitched before?
First of all, God bless you if you're pitching. It's so stressful. It's really hard to like condense a story into that elevator pitch and catch someone's attention. Partly the SEL, yes, is a selling point and it's significant. It's just, I think that you don't want to hit it too much over the head or they're going to think that you've written maybe a preachy book. And so you can mention it, but hopefully in your pitch where you talk about whatever it is, the character, the setting, or the plot, it comes through that it's obvious. And so I think the pitch itself of the book is just going to be like, what makes this a compelling story? And then the why will this sell? Because in my mind, there's two different things. You're pitching the story first, but then you're also pitching like, why do you want me? Whether you're pitching to an agent or an editor because you want to go the traditional route, or you're pitching to the parent or the librarian or the whoever, like they need to check their boxes, And I do believe that librarians and teachers are having boxes to check, or even homeschoolers. You want to make sure that you're meeting the requirements, and then you also have a book that has some depth. So it's not just plot. It's not just these characters and setting. There's something deeper here. But I think separating that maybe from the pitch itself so that it's like, here's what the story's about. And here's some more reasons why I think you should buy it. Or if you're going to be going into some place like a bookstore, you're going to be trying to sell it at a conference, or like I went to a homeschooling convention. And so like there are these buzzwords that when you're talking to parents that you do want to hit, you want to make sure that they hear that, but I don't think you lead with it. Because if you lead with it, they're going to be just like a kid and they're going to be like, I don't know, that sounds kind of boring. Or anybody could say that. So unless it really is intrinsically tied to the story and the characters, then, do I really believe that? Do I believe that this is something that really works? It'll come through. So if I say I wrote a book with a Rwandan child who was born with club feet and spent the first 7 years of her life crawling and then got the opportunity to come to America, but she didn't speak English and she had to leave her family. All of these things are tumbling in. Your brain is already making connections of like, wow. I think if there's one thing I've learned about a pitch is be brief. You don't have to tell everything. Just tell enough that they're asking questions. Because then if you're sitting there talking to a homeschooled parent and you've captured their interest and they've got 4 kids in tow and they're walking the aisles with this big old bag full of books, they're still going to stop and ask you those questions. Or if you're speaking to an editor who's got a pile full of manuscripts on their table, or an agent, and you're trying to catch their attention, catch it with the story, catch it with your voice. And that other stuff is going to come through because like I said, there's so many SEL books out there right now. And so it doesn't necessarily distinguish your book. There's lots of books that talk about empathy. There's lots of books that talk about it. And the reason is because it's so important. But it's going to be implied. If you tell the story, they're going to get it.
I'd like to ask book reviewer Meredith a question. We all know, you've mentioned it and I've seen it in what I do day to day. Yes, it's an important thing. We need social and emotional learning. Educators are looking for it. Librarians are looking for it. Parents really need it, especially in this post-COVID world that we're still really catching up on child development. But we do have a lot of books that have this topic woven in it very strongly. I'm just wondering, is there one pillar of social emotional learning that's saturating the market? Is there something that perhaps new emerging writers might want to avoid so that they can have a more unique story to pitch?
I've never heard that asked at like a conference with an editor or online, but what you generally hear is more of a broad question. So people may ask, what is the market saturated with? And like what I've heard is, well, there's a lot of pictures books out there right now about food. And so like we have too much about food. We don't want food. And so there's like they're topical. I have never heard an editor say there's too many books about empathy or there's too many books about kindness. And, maybe because the book, first and foremost, isn't about kindness. It's about a stick and a stone who are friends. And that's so compelling. And bonus, it's about kindness at the end. And then it's like this double wallop of it was a good story. And so I really don't think that there's like a glut. I don't think there's, and I think actually what happens is teachers and librarians, parents, you can get so creative and you can pull a book that wasn't really intended to be teaching that to kind of suit your needs. I used to do that with my kids. When they were little, I taught Sunday school and we would get the lesson. Here's the lesson, whatever in the story in the Bible. And what we want you to tell the kids is that the bottom line is unconditional love. And they're going to get it from the story. And so I would tell the story and I would say the words unconditional love. And then I remember this one in particular. I pulled out the picture book, No David, and it is by David Shannon. And it's this little kid. It's super brief. I did this with like 2 and 3-year-olds. They would just be mesmerized by the illustrations. They may have been like driving the cars and putting Play-Doh in their nose during the Bible story. And maybe that was my fault for not telling it well. But when I read No David, they were like glued to their seats. And what's so precious about that book is it's about this kid and his mom keeps telling him, no, David. And then he tracks mud in or he picks his nose or and at the very end, he uses a baseball bat and he hits a ball and it knocks down a vase and he gets sent to the corner. And it's like the climax of the picture book. And it's so sad. And then you see David turn around and he's crying. And then you read the words, yes, David, I still love you. And the mom hugs David. I mean, unconditional love shown in a like every day, every kid gets in trouble. Every kid hopefully knows the love, unconditional love, And so powerful book. So yeah, I love that one. But I was going to pull out another one, another show and tell. So The Seven Silly Eaters. It's written by Marianne Hoberman and it's illustrated by Marla Frizzy. And I picked it. I love the illustrations. Like, I just want to live in this book. They live in this tiny little house by the sea, and this mom has all these kids, and every kid wants to eat something different. And so each time a kid, and she just complies, and she makes all these different things. And in the end, and until finally she just gets so frazzled. And so I won't tell you the end of the story, but it's really sweet. It's got a great ending. But what I chose to talk about was faithfulness, because I was like, that's a really hard concept for kids to get, but I think it's a good one. It's an important one for them to understand. What does it mean to be faithful? What does it mean to be a faithful parent or to be a faithful friend? And really, I could have used stick and stone for that too, because you have this faithful friend that comes along and helps even though things get hard. But with the Seven Silly Eaters, the mom loves the kids so much, and you can just see it in her face. You can see it in her chaotic house, how hard it is for her to try and please every single kid. And it's really not a book about like, mothers should do everything that their children ask them to do. In fact, it's the opposite. But what it eventually shows is the kids turning around and trying to do something for the mother. And even though they do it in kind of a flawed way, it turns out really beautiful. Anyways, I can't even remember what the question is, but when you asked it, I thought Seven Silly Eaters. That's my answer to the question I can't remember.
I think these are great, and I love the example books that you chose. These actually remind me of something else that I was thinking about when you mentioned sort of like don't hit people over the head with the theme. And I think of 2 books by Mo Willems. The one with the snake where they were playing catch. And the snake he's making a joke about the fact that he doesn't have arms or legs. And he finds it funny, and then they find a way to make him join in. So part of that theme is making your friend feel included. And then another one is from my childhood, and it's that terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. And I still remember the illustrations. And he's just kind of like the youngest. I'm the youngest in my family, showing again that empathy, but not sort of like hitting yourself over the head or the reader over the head with that theme.
Love that. And I don't know that snake book. I'm going to have to find it. I just love when we get read to. Reading aloud is such a connection. It's such a great tool, whether it's a picture book or even like a middle grade read aloud with your kids. You're sharing the same story. Now you share the same vocabulary. So you're writing in the car, or you're maybe at a playground and your kid doesn't want to share, or whatever it is. Or maybe there's a kid that's all by themselves and you can be like, hey, remember the snake? And nobody wanted to play with the snake because they didn't have arms. Like, how can you play with that kid? Which actually, that happened with Rebecca. When she came to America and she didn't speak English, she desperately wanted a friend. But it's really hard to be friends with someone who doesn't speak your language. And so there's a whole story about other kids would come and they're certainly not unkind. They're like, hi. And then they run off and do their thing because they want to play. They don't want to do something hard. And Kate sat down and figured out, how can I be friends with this girl, and took the time. And yeah, what a great message that was, you know? It was really, really sweet.
I think this is amazing. And I just love like all of the examples that you've chosen for the books, especially. So what advice would you give people looking for SEL heavy books? How to choose those books with that SEL theme for the classroom or a collection?
I am such a junkie of Substack newsletters or blog posts or podcasts where people who know more than me tell me their picks. I mean, there's so much out there. And so the other thing I love to do is this is the best homework ever. And maybe people don't have the margin to do this, but if I have an hour or two when I can go sit down at a bookstore, at a library, if you've got a kid in tow, bring a few snacks, let them browse, and just start pulling things out. But I'll talk to a librarian first. The other day I went in, I talked to my librarian. I had a theme and I was like, hey, like, you got any suggestions? And they often do. And the same with the bookseller. Like, they can't wait. As a former bookseller, I can tell you one of my favorite things was being a matchmaker and putting the perfect book in the perfect parent's hands. And since I've started this newsletter, sometimes I'll get little emails from parents that I know, I need a book about bullying. And it's not because my kid is being bullied. It's because I got a call from the teacher and he's bullying someone else. What can I do? And I feel for them. Okay, you've got like a 5 or 6-year-old kid. They are so pliable. I can't wait to find the perfect book that's going to just tenderize him. And he's going to be like, that's me. And one of the ones I suggested was We Don't Eat Our Classmates, which is such a perfect book for that because it's this dinosaur that eats kids in the classroom. And he gets in trouble and his parents are like, I told you, you're never going to make a friend if you keep eating them. And you see these great pictures of that he's just spit out his classmates and they have like spit on them. And what happens at the end? The goldfish bites the dinosaur's hand and it hurts. He bites her finger and she's like, oh, it doesn't feel good to be eaten, does it? So I just found that book because it was face out at Barnes & Noble, or maybe I saw it at the library. I can't even remember why I saw it, but people talk. Books that are good, people are going to talk about them. I talk about it on my newsletter. There's so many. I should have written a list for you. If you have show notes, I'll send you some of my favorite. I just happened upon this woman that's a librarian that does storytime read-alouds, and every week she posts what her read-alouds were, and she posts what that book was about, and then she gives it a ranking and why it worked well or not well as a read aloud. So it's real easy to tell. So when you ask, like, if I'm really looking for SEL heavy, if I want to find something that's going to help me with social emotional learning, if you can't tell from the cover, I really think talking to people is the best thing to do. And honestly, if you reached out to that librarian lady and you said, hey, I'm a parent and I'm looking for books about whatever, compassion or being gentle, all my kid wants to do is break stuff, they would love it. Don't be shy. Just ask, because people who love books and love children, reading to children, the whole book world, they can't wait to talk about it. Like, they won't be quiet about it. I almost want like the specific example on, well, who's the person? Who are they buying for? Why? Tell me more. I can't wait to find that. And then I just start going down my shelves. I've saved lots of books. It's almost like being a detective. It's the best. So that said, sometimes I think it is pretty obvious, even from a cover, that this book is going to be good. I was thinking earlier, there's a book called What Happened to You? And it's a picture of a little boy with only one leg. And the whole book is about this kid, and he's playing on the playground, and he just wants to play pirates. But this girl comes along, and she's like, what happened to you? And he doesn't really want to talk about it. And he never does talk about it. Like by the end of the book, there's several kids and they're all asking and they're guessing and like kids do. They're not trying to be mean, they're just being curious. But it's really opens up a great conversation. Okay, when you see somebody who looks different from you, like say we're in the grocery store and you see somebody, how can you be kind? How can you be gentle? Another great tip is to flip to the back. And if there's a note to parents, if there's a note to teachers, if there's an appendix, if there's more information, then you can kind of garner that there's some teaching going on in that book. There was extra information. They have so much they want to say and they couldn't get it all into the story, so they put it in the back matter. The What Happened to You book, you find out that the author has one leg and there's a photograph of him with his kid and he's got his prosthetic on and he has a note to parents and he's like, hey, it happens to everybody. Don't feel bad, but here's some things you can do. This is what I enjoy, or this is what helps me. And I super appreciated that, you know?
I would love to ask you, what are you working on? What's in the works? What's behind the scenes? Could you give us a little sneak peek of maybe something SEL related that is happening in your upcoming book?
I have something on my desk that I'm going to show you. So I have a book coming out in May. So I actually have two very different things happening in my writing world. One is this brand new work in progress that I'm working on. It is at the very, very early stages. I haven't even finished a draft. And so every day I'm getting to that book. And it's, hopefully I've captured the emotional heart if I just tell you it's about a little girl. Her parents died when she was 1. She lives with her grandparents and they've lived in an RV all her life. And it's her 11th birthday and she gets a birthday present and it's a key to a house and they're about to move back home. This girl's always wanted a best friend and she's made lots and lots of friends. She's made 360 of them living on the road, but she's never had a best friend, but she's not sure she wants to leave the life that she's loved. So that's the hook and as it stands right now. And so I'm hoping that I can really talk about what does it take to really be a friend? And the whole point of it is learning how to stay. There's no shortcuts to a long relationship. That's my guiding light, actually. So that's one thing. The other thing that I would usually be really intimidated about is marketing because I have this new book coming out in May. And I've just recently hit on the thing that's going to allow me to really not be intimidated and also be engaged. And it's to connect with people, which is actually the thing that the book is about, is the power of connection. And so I don't know if you guys have ever had a stamp. It's like a wax stamper where you like pour the wax and then you press it down and it seals an envelope, like a secret envelope, like a secret mission sealed with a wax stamp. And so I got 2 of them. I got one that has the world on it. And then I got another one that has the moon on it. And so in the books, the bad guy stuff, his symbol is this full moon, and there's a reason why. And so that's, I don't know if you can tell, but that's this full moon. And then the good guys defend all that is true, good, and beautiful in the world. And so their stamp is the world. And for the last 28 years, I've sent out a Christmas card every year. And before I ever got published, I would send out that card and people would email me and they'd say, thank you for your card. I love your writing. And it was like my very first fan mail and it encouraged me. And it really, like in all those years of rejection, when I would send out books and it would say no. And I was just like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I'm not a good writer. I still sent out those Christmas letters and they were very off the cuff. They were very just fun for me and they really were received well. And so every single Christmas card person is going to get a letter inviting them to Operation Mobilize. And it's going to tell them that they are a superhero, that their voice was what pushed me to keep at it when I thought I couldn't do it, and that they could still do that. And so I'm going to ask 3 things of them. And I hate asking things of people. My last newsletter was all about books about helping. And I don't know if you've read Toad by Toad, Towed, Toad, like a tow truck, Toad by Toad, Toad. It just won a new Caldecott honor. And it's all about this toad and how he helps people because he drives a tow truck, but then his tow truck breaks down and he has to ask for help and how hard that is. And it struck me because here I am asking for people and I'm going to ask them to leave a review and do a pre-order, but it's really just a way for me to connect with people. And honestly, I believe that people sometimes want to be asked and I'm too shy to do it. And so I just don't want to be a bother or whatever. That's something I'm actually really excited about. And I never, ever thought I could say that I was excited about marketing, but it's not marketing. It's sending a letter to these people and thanking them for who they are. And if that's all that happens, so be it. Not really tying a lot of expectation to it, but can't wait to send people a real deal letter sealed with wax. And I've never done it before, so I'm going to do it today. I'm going to do my first blob of wax and press into it.
It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. You have hooked me with the next book. Now I am going to be watching the clock and the calendar way too closely because it sounds incredible. And I have to say, you have absolutely blended everything perfectly. It's full circle here on the Storyteller Shelf podcast because you ended with something that all of us really need to hear, which is our own author social emotional growth. There are a lot of challenges that we do as an author. Doesn't matter how you're published, self-published, traditionally published. We still have a lot to do on our end, and a lot of that involves going beyond our work and talking to the public and doing the important things like asking for feedback. You need feedback in this business. So I'm so happy to hear that you found a fun way to do it, and it's going to be exciting for you. This is going to be a positive challenge, and I hope that people will take inspiration from that and follow in your footsteps. I think we're going to have some flatterers and that they're going to copy you and jump on the bandwagon.
I would love it. The name of that book is The Minor Rescue. Honestly, my publicist, if he heard this whole thing and said, Meredith, you never said the title of that book, he would kill me. And it actually, it comes out in May of 25, but this is airing in August, which is so perfect. I just love that it's a back to school theme that you're thinking about as you're thinking about kids entering that school season again and being around other kids and all of the interaction. SEL is the perfect thing to talk about. Middle grade is the perfect place to be. I just love writing middle grade. And I think as kids get back into school, they're going to be picking up books again, or maybe it's summer reading, who knows? But they're talking about books. It's entering the conversation again, which I just love. So anyways, thank you guys. I think you're so nail on the head. It was the perfect thing to bring about in August.
Let us thank you and everyone that if you want to learn more about Meredith, everything that she does, because she does more than one thing, especially if you want to support her books and her book reviewing, please go to our website, go to our episodic calendar page, and it will take you to a landing page where you can learn all about all of these things that she's doing and go to her website so that you can follow her, support her. We would really appreciate that. We love Meredith, and we know that you probably got so much motivation from this episode because I can see Teresa's face, so we are totally jazzed. And if you're listening on Spotify or Pandora, please know that it's all smiles here on YouTube. You can see all of us lighting up. All right, storytellers, thank you so much for tuning in to the Storyteller Shelf podcast. As usual, we are going to ask you to go to the storytellershelfpodcast.com, find that episodic calendar page, and find our links so that you can see where to support us and our guests. If you enjoy this episode, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and share this with a friend because we know that other people out there could use this too. And one last thing, if you like freebies, definitely join us in our email newsletter. Pop your email in, it's for free. We don't spam you, but we occasionally send things like career opportunities, awards and contests, and handy dandy things like pitch guides and query guides that you might find very useful. So otherwise, we will let you go today, and we'll see you again next time.